Now let's have a look at the day's big news with John Storey from the Institute of Public Affairs. Let's start with former Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who has called on the Albanese government to consider sanctions against Chinese government officials over human rights abuses against the Uyghurs. He addressed the Interparliamentary Alliance on China in Tokyo today. John, what do you make of Scott Morrison's warning that we should not be seduced by Beijing?
Well, I think there's something in it. I've got some sympathy for that view. I certainly find it interesting that just a couple of weeks ago, Foreign Minister Penny Wong went to London to lecture our British friends about the evils of 19th century colonialism.
That's true.
Whilst we're watching colonialism unfold in Xinjiang province right now. But if we are going to take pot shots at China, we do have to be prepared for retaliation. We've got to get serious on our defence, and we've got to get serious on our energy security. A net zero future is a future reliant on China for energy. We will be reliant on Chinese wind farms, wind turbines, solar panels and batteries. If you think it's hard now to stand up for the bullies in Beijing, it'll be a hell of a lot harder when we're reliant on them for our energy.
And they're still building these coal-fired plants. I mean, somehow they're building the solar panels, but for their own industry and use, they've got our coal powering it. So figure that out. Now, to report also in today's Australian on top education officials warning teachers against politicising the referendum for an Indigenous voice to Parliament. But John, do we believe this, knowing what we know about the leftist indoctrination in classroom, including there's some schools instructing students to memorise the Uluru Statement from the Heart? I mean, really, do we think they're not going to politicise this particular debate?
I find it so depressing that we even have a debate about whether teachers should teach both sides of the referendum question. Too many teachers think it's their job to indoctrinate their students. They should be teaching kids how to think, not what to think.
Yes.
We've got all the institutions, government, big tech, these woke corporations, all on board for the voice. Can we please just have a neutral classroom?
Oh, I can't imagine. I mean, the curriculum is so corrupted already, let alone the focus that's going to be on the referendum this year. Now, this is an interesting story from the US where leftist TV host Don Lemon, well, he put his foot in it. He kind of seems to have claimed, well, he did in fact claim, that UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, who's only 51, is no longer in her prime. Just Google it, he says.
She says people, politicians or something are not in their prime. Nikki Haley isn't in her prime. Sorry. When a woman is considered to be in her prime in her 20s and 30s and maybe 40s.
What are you talking? Wait.
That's not according to me.
Prime for what?
It depends. I mean, it's just like prime. If you look it up, if you Google when is a woman in her prime, it'll say 20s, 30s, and 40s. I don't necessarily.
40s. Oh, I got another.
I'm not saying
decade.
I agree with that.
Yes. Why don't you Google women in their prime? That's obviously how you get the answer. I mean, what do you say?
I mean, Don Lemon getting roasted by a fellow leftist is a great way to finish the week. I just love Don Trust the Science Lemon Googling that ever trustworthy source Google to figure out when women are in the prime.
Is it?
Nikki Haley's 51. If she's not in her prime, what does that make Joe Biden?
And in a prime for what? Are we talking about childbirth? Are we talking about her athletic career? Are we talking about her political career? It's just such a bizarre thing. And then to double down and say, no, just Google it.
Look, my advice to Don, it's advice I follow myself, is to never talk about a woman's age. So.
Well, I think once you get to the Nancy Pelosi years and you're a politician, then I think your age is, just like with Joe Biden or Donald Trump, it's up for discussion. Now, it's been a huge afternoon in New South Wales politics. We've had both Labor and the Perrottet government impacted, but certainly the Liberals have taken the biggest hits here. The Finance Minister gone, the Parliamentary Secretary. What do you make of what's happening in New South Wales? It's heating up before the election.
Well, it's clearly a disaster for the Perrottet government for this to be happening so soon to an election. But I think the finance minister had to go. I listened to his press conference today, and he does seem to struggle with the grasp that a self-managed super fund requires you to self-manage the fund and know what you're actually investing in. However, I do find it, I do long for living in a state where the media hold their politicians to a high standard, which they should. If we want good politicians, we've got to hold them to a high standard. Unfortunately, that's something we don't enjoy here in Victoria.
Well, they've been held to a standard, certainly in New South Wales. The Labor candidate in very high-profile candidate, former NRL player. He has stepped down after revelations of his involvement in a sex party and with a spanking station. I mean, really, the details of this story are unlike anything I have seen in recent years. Is that fair enough, or do you think we're being, those who have a problem with that are being just prudes?
Look, I think we made a mistake a long time ago when we started looking at politicians for our moral guidance as the exemplars of society. I'd much rather focus on their competence, but pictures of him wearing just a tie in his underwear, look, in our modern age, it's so funny. There's all these sights you don't want to see at a click away, yet heaven forbid a celebrity gets caught in one of those photos.
He is a former footballer, but I mean, he was seat of Monaro. It's a crucial seat, so it is a bit of a blow for Labor as well. John, thank you so much for joining me.